yourself. All you're doing is hurting the people around you. Because the person who lives in some other state, they don't even know you're upset. And you're holding on to that. And all it's doing is eating you alive. Let it go. Let it go. I can't. Oh, no. Can't or won't. Because that's what the Pharisees used to say to Jesus. We can't do that. And in the Hebrew culture, can't meant I won't. And that's a heart problem. You don't understand. Oh no, I don't need to understand. I understand the solution. Just cut it out. How do I know? Because I've had to do this in my whole life. Just cut it out. Let's look at how this applies to last week's conversation. Those of you that weren't here last week was about if a man looks at a woman with lust in his heart, he's already committed adultery in his heart with her. Okay? And today, we're talking about things and thinking and being enslaved to things. So how would this go with last week? Well, last week was about intentional, selfish thoughts and generating emotions and a chemical response to use somebody else for your own gratification. How are you going to stop doing that? Just cut it out. Just stop doing it. That's how. You say, well, it's pretty tough. Well, I want to tell you something. You have thoughts in your mind, and this is going to sound weird, but you cannot oppose the thoughts in your mind. You cannot fight against the thoughts in your mind. Because thoughts come and go. Some of them are good, some of them are unwanted, some of them are not nice, but you can't stop the thought process. It will always come. And you can't fight against the thoughts. What you have to do is replace the thoughts. And this is what I mean. Because our thoughts are not necessarily sinful. Just because I think something doesn't make it sinful. I lost my job, I'm on my way home, there's a 7-Eleven, I could rip it off, I'd be fine. That's not necessarily sinful. It's sinful when what? When my heart gets involved and says, I would if I could. Just because something pops in your brain doesn't mean that it's sin. It's what you do with it after that that determines how far you go down the road. And I want you to listen. The thoughts that we dwell on, we stoke them, we energize them, it leads to not only thoughts, but then we believe and then we act. Those things can become sinful. But you can't stop the thoughts, and you can't fight them with resistance. You have to replace them. You have to consciously say to yourself, I will think about these things. Now notice that it doesn't say, I will not think about those things. You have to choose to say, I will think about these things. And this is what I mean. In golf, how many of you play golf? Okay? I wish I had $1 for every time somebody said to me, I just knew I was going to hit it in the water. Okay? Why? Because you got up and you said to yourself, don't hit it in the water. Don't hit it in the trees. Don't hit it in the sand. Don't do this. And I'm telling you, your mind cannot think in the negative. Your mind does not work that way. The pitcher does not get up to Manny Ramirez from the Boston Red Sox and say, don't throw him a hanging curveball, he'll hit it in left field. And he throws him a hanging curveball, guess where it's going? Left field. Because your mind cannot think negatively. I got the privilege this week to play golf for the first time in a long time with my friend. And there was a golf course I'd never been to before. We came to this one hole that went down and like this, and you couldn't see where you were supposed to go. And he steps up and he says, the hole goes down and to the left. I said, great. He says, look, don't hit it in the trap and don't hit it in the pond. And I said, tell me where to hit it. Don't tell me where not to hit it. Tell me where to hit it. Hit it at that pine tree that's up there. And I said, you mean the one that's leaning like this? And I hit it right at that pine tree. Because your mind will do what you think about. Okay? Those of you that play golf. I had a girl in Lake Wales. She was a high school senior. Her name was Lindsay. Her dad owned the golf course, and she was an incredible amateur player. She would go out and shoot 3 or 4 under on the first 8 holes of the back 9. She would come to number 18 every time and make a 7, 8, or 9. Every time. She could not break par on the back because she always messed up the last hole. So I took out a range ball bucket of balls, which is about 80 balls. We put them out where she normally hits her tee shot, and I said to her, tell me what you see. She says, I see a pond, I see a pine tree, I see sand trap, I see woods on the left. And I said, no you don't. She said, yes I do. And I said, all right, hit. Ball in the water. Put another ball down. What do you see? I see a pond on the right, I see a pine tree on the right, a sand trap, and woods on the left. I said, no you don't. She said, yes I do. Okay, hit. Ball in the sand trap. Tell me what you see. And she'd go through the same thing every time. And I put my hand over her eyes, and I said, you see a flag on the green. That's all. There is no water, there are no trees, there is no sand trap. There's a pin on the green. You could lay 10,000 golf balls on that green and none of them would touch. All she could see was what not to do. So what did she do? What not to do. You and I, our brains cannot function in a negative. You guys know what a monk is? The little dudes with the robes, right? These guys, when they started, the idea was they wanted to get away from the culture so much because they didn't want the culture to influence how they would think. And so they went out into the middle of nowhere and they built these monasteries where they're going to hang out. And you know what? If you read the writings of monks, they're just as sexually tempted, they're just as greedy, they're just as selfish, they're just as arrogant as everybody else. You know why? Because they're people. They're people. Being away from the culture doesn't change how we think, and in some respects, it makes it worse. If you're on a diet, what do you think about when you got a spare minute? Ice cream. I just want some ice cream. Or whatever your vice is. Mine's popcorn. Okay? But my point is, our brain doesn't work just because we get away from the trouble. There was a great article in Time magazine last summer written by Mother Teresa. They found some writings of Mother Teresa, and before she died, she wrote in there how God was so disappointed in her, and how Christ was not happy with her life, and she even questioned her own faith. And you and I are going, are you kidding? That's what she wrote. Why? Because being separate from the culture didn't solve her problem. And we've got this idea, if I could just move to, middle of nowhere, where there was no people, life would be great. No, it wouldn't. In some ways, it would be even harder. Because it's inevitable, it's human nature, that the things that we think about, we become. Proverbs says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. If you think about it enough, you're going to do it. Now, how many of us have heard that saying, I'm not going to be like my dad? And all you think about is not being like your dad. Well, guess what? You're going to be just like your dad, because you tried not to be so hard. Just be you. Just be you. So how do you win over poor thinking? Two things. First, the best way to defeat poor thinking is to do something. You can't just sit there. The real cure is healthy thinking. Last summer, we were going through a lot of transitions vocationally, and I've never had this problem before. I would have panic attacks. And all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe. I mean, literally, and those of you that have had them, you know what I'm talking about. Just all of a sudden, your heart starts racing and you can't breathe and you're like looking around and you just, looking for the oxygen mask. And the only way I could get past it was to start thinking about something else on purpose.